So now that we understand how the cash flows in and the shares flow out, etc., let's understand why short selling works, how it works, and why it's so important to the market itself. When we think about selling stocks short, here's what it really means. We're short because we don't actually have the shares. They're missing from our account. In other words, we owe them. You don't own anything when you sell a stock short. You're actually in debt those number of shares. And so because of this, people think, well, that's not something we should be able to do. You can't just sell something you don't have, but you can. You say, well, how can I sell something I don't own? And the answer is, well, you borrow it, right? So we're just going to call the broker. We're going to say, hey, broker, can I borrow some shares? And I'm going to go sell them on the open market. So let's understand how this works a little bit. Whenever I say, oh, you're just going to borrow some shares and go sell them, people say, oh, that can't be legal. That's not right. And the answer is, well, it is legal. Now, why would it be legal? Here's the reason it's legal. It's the rules of the game. Whenever we play any game, we have a set of rules that we can abide by, right? In the world of stock trading, there are a set of rules. It just so happens that in this game, we're playing with real money, but there's a set of rules that govern it. And one of those rules says that we can borrow shares from the broker. The broker can lend them to us at a fair interest rate price, and then we can sell those shares on the open market. We can receive the cash for it as long as we return the shares back to the broker. It's called a short trade. And this has been in place since we began trading the free open market. You say, well, why would they come up with such a rule? And here's the answer. Whenever we have a short trade or the ability to trade short, it creates liquidity in the market. What do I mean by liquidity? Well, just think about this. We've all seen a market bubble whenever prices keep going up and up and up and people keep buying. But what if we had a situation where the prices kept going up and there was nobody to take that counter trade and actually sell something in the market? What if everybody knew prices kept going up? Well, no one would want to sell. And if no one wants to sell, then there's all the buying demand and there's no selling demand. Without selling demand, what happens? The prices go up even higher. So what short selling does is it allows a speculator to come in and look at the market. They look at a price of a stock and they say, you know what? That stock is overpriced. I think it needs to go down. I'm going to take the risk and I'm going to short this trade. What that does is it provides liquidity into the market. Now, it might seem like this doesn't actually provide any balance to the market, but what it does is it ensures a free market. Without the short selling side of the market, you get a runaway bubble or a runaway panic. And we have all these massive emotional extremes that are happening in the market. You would not want that. In fact, anytime that politicians kind of get on the negative short selling bandwagon and they decide they're going to write some rules against it, if you've ever watched what happens in the market at that time, it creates massive emotional swings and it's never good for the market. Short selling is essential to a free market, and the reason it's one of the rules is because it creates liquidity and it ensures a truly free market. So anytime someone tells you it's not right, you just say, yep, it's right and it's good. That's the reason we have short selling. Now, this brings up an interesting question, and the question is short selling morally correct? And I never thought about this until a few years ago. I actually ran into a family friend, and she and her husband we were in the middle of a bear market, and they were struggling with some of their financing, and I suggested to them, I said, hey, why don't you take some short trades and trade the downside of the market? And this sweet lady, she says to me, Jeremy, there's no way I could ever make money while other people are losing money. And I thought about that, and I said, well, it's not your fault if they choose to buy the stock when it's going up or when it's going down instead of going up, is it? And she said, well, I just feel so guilty about it. And so I'd like to propose a question to you. Is it your fault? If someone wants to buy the stock, why would you not want to sell it to them? And I would suggest that we do this at all types of other markets in our lives. We just don't realize it. And then you apply it to the stock market, and suddenly some people feel a little bit guilty about it. Now, you may not feel guilty, but some people do. And so if you're one of the people that has maybe had this question of if it was morally correct, let's just talk about it. Have you ever looked at a collectible item, for example? Many years ago, I used to collect baseball cards. And I had a whole collection of baseball cards that I was really proud of. And then one day I found out that I had this rookie card of Mark McGwire. And I found out that it was actually worth something. Well, I used to think it was worth something, but when I found out it was really worth something, I went straight to the baseball card shop and I said, I'll sell you this card, because they were paying more than I thought the card was worth. Now, fast forward, if the value of that card goes down in value, is that my fault? The baseball card shop was willing to pay whatever it was, 30, 40 bucks for the card. Is it my fault if the card goes down? No, the guy was willing to pay for it. We do this with our housing market all the time. Back in 2006, 2007, before the housing bust, what happened? People were paying substantially more for the value of a house than maybe we thought it was worth. And when you get into a housing bubble, what happens? People do that. They'll pay for it. And in fact, if you look on Zillow right now, the real estate website, they've got a section that says, make me an offer. If someone makes an offer that you can't refuse, well, yeah, we'll move. That's when, to the person who's selling, the person who's buying is paying too much. And yet people don't usually have a problem making those kind of trades, if you will, because it just seems like, well, someone was willing to pay me more than the value of my item. Well, I'd like to suggest that when we sell stock short, we're doing the same thing. We're looking at a tangible item and we're saying this item should be worth X price, but these people are willing to pay Y price. Why should I not sell it to them if they're willing to pay for it? So now that we kind of understand better what short selling is, let's ask the question, why would we want to sell something we don't own and try to make profit while it's going down? And to illustrate this, I'm going to bring up a story. We're going to totally leave the world of stock for a minute. Do you remember the iPad 2 when it came out? I remember when the iPad 2 came out, my business partner Josh and I, we went down to the mall, not for the iPad. We were there for something totally different. And we'd forgotten that the new iPad 2 was being released. And as we walked in the mall, I was shocked. There was this line of people that went all the way down the hallway of the mall, and it double backed around the food court, and it came back down. And we realized people are waiting to buy the iPad. These people are crazy. I mean, they've been camping out all day. And some of them were actually in line with their original iPad, typing out on the iPad while they're waiting. Crazy people, right? And so what do you think happened to these people who'd camped out all day? 5 o'clock comes, the Apple Store opens the doors. People can come in and buy their iPads, but boom, they're gone before you know it. Well, we've got about 500 angry customers out here who've been camping out all day, and they didn't have a chance to buy their iPad. So what do you think they're going to do? They're going to go home, and they're going to go to the greatest free market in the world. Where's that? eBay. And what are they going to do? They're going to pay whatever they have to pay because they're determined they want an iPad. This is exactly what happened at this time. During that time, if you went home and you looked on eBay, people were paying an outrageous amount for these iPads, $1,500, $2,000, $2,500. And of course, they could have just waited a few weeks and buy it in the store, but no, they had to have the iPad. So our buddy Peter here, he's looking online. He's like, my goodness, these people will pay anything for an iPad. What do you think Peter's thinking? He's thinking, man, if only I had an iPad. If only I had an iPad. Have you ever had this happen? You see someone's paying too much, and you're like, man, if only I had one, I would sell it for that price. Well, that's what Peter's thinking. And Peter finds out his buddy Ted got himself an iPad. So he's like, hey, Ted, can I borrow that iPad? I understand you bought it, you camped out, you got it, however you got it, but your kid's birthday's not coming up for a couple months. You don't need it. Let me take care of that for you, buddy Ted. And Ted's like, hey, I understand. You've always been a great friend. You'll return it. So just make sure you bring me my iPad back. So he gets the iPad. Peter runs home, and now he's got an iPad. Now, it's not his. Where did he get it? He borrowed it from Ted. So Peter takes Ted's iPad, goes home, puts it on eBay, and there's William. William's on the other end, and he's like, there's an iPad on eBay. I'll pay anything. I waited all day in line. I slept out all night. I got a horrible back because I slept on the concrete. I need an iPad, right? So William's bidding, and Sherry's bidding, and James is bidding, and all these people around the world are bidding on these iPads, a couple ones that are available on eBay. Then before you know it, boom, the sale is made, $2,000. Now Peter's thinking, William's a sucker, right? William's thinking, I got my iPad. Now here's my question for you. Is it Peter's fault that William was willing to pay $2,000? Do you think William knew deep down that the iPad was not worth $2,000? That maybe it was only worth, maybe half that? But William was determined to have an iPad, right? And so William was willing to pay extra. He was willing to pay premium because he was determined he needed that iPad for whatever reason. You guys understand the idea here. Peter recognized that the iPad was not worth $2,000. William was willing to pay it. Peter saw the opportunity. Now let's understand what happened to William's balance sheet here. Going in, William had nothing. He'd borrowed an iPad. He hadn't sold anything. After the transaction occurs, Peter now has an additional $2,000 in cash. And what about his iPad? He's now minus one iPad. Well, why is he minus one? His actual position didn't change. He still is missing an iPad. He's minus one because he's missing one, aka he is what? Short. He's short one iPad. So the balance sheet looks like he's got $2,000 cash and he's minus one iPad. Now what does Peter have to do to make good with his buddy Ted? Peter's got to come along, and at some point, he's got to go buy an iPad. All right, so let's see what happens. Sure enough, a couple weeks later, he's walking through Best Buy. They got iPads, good. He throws it in his shopping cart, and he's good to go. He pays fair market price now. He pays the actual retail price of $599, and the difference on this deal was $1,401. And so what you see happen is Peter exploited the opportunity or took advantage of the opportunity. As people were willing to pay too much for the iPad, Peter went out, borrowed an iPad, sold the iPad, and then waited for the fair market price to come up, goes and buys the iPad at fair market, and the difference is his profit of $1,401. He returns it to Ted. Now, what if Peter goes home from that and he looks online and he sees Netflix and he says, oh my goodness, people will pay anything for Netflix. This is crazy, $250 a share. And so, what does Peter do? Same thing. He goes to a broker this time. He says, hey, broker Ted, can I borrow some Netflix? You've got it in your holdings here. I want to go sell it. Broker says, sure, Peter. Just be sure to return it. And you see the process. It's exactly the same thing that happened with the iPad. On the other end, there's William. Ooh, Netflix, it's running higher. I better buy some. It could change. It could be my big, big chance. And remember, we talked about this in lesson 2. Why do people buy? The fear of loss of capital or the fear of loss of opportunity? In this case, William is buying on the fear of loss of opportunity. And at market peaks, during bubbles, this is why people buy. And so what Peter's doing is he's recognizing that William is willing to buy Netflix out of a fear of loss of opportunity. And he's willing to pay too much for it. So Peter sells it to him, $245 a share, you little sucker. And what does Peter do? He waits for Netflix to fall in value. Netflix goes down at $205 a share. Peter decides to cover his position. He now buys it. It's the exact same process we saw happen with the iPad, but now Peter's done it with a stock. That's really all that shorting is. And if you can understand that shorting is just simply the idea of borrowing an item, whether it be an iPad or whether it be some shares, and selling it while people are willing to pay too much, and then you buy it back at a lower price, then you understand what shorting is. So now that we understand selling stock short, let's walk through the process of placing an actual short order. When we get ready to place a short order, understand there's two types of orders. We've already talked about this, the buy order and the sell order. But with a short trade, we're going to start with the sell order. Instead of starting with the buy, we're going to start with the sell. So when we sell stock short, we're going to start with a sell order, which is usually a sell short. It's typically how your broker will say it. And this will initiate a new short trade. Now your account's going to have a negative share value, and it's going to have additional cash. Because remember, every time we sell, shares go out and cash comes in. Now to close the short trade, it'll just be the opposite. We're going to use a buy order, and typically your broker will call that a buy to cover order. And this will close the short trade. That's the way a short trade will work. Now the difference in the sell price and the buy price is going to be your profit or your loss in the event that the trade goes against you. So if we look at our order ticket here, you're going to be able to see that this is the same order ticket we used for buying. You still got a stock issue here. We got our ticker in here. But the action is to sell the stock short. And then, of course, we have our quantity. We've got a limit price. We got the price initiated in here. And then you can just basically go through the order form the same way you did before. Once you've kind of gone through it and you've done an overview, you can click on the preview button. That will give you the preview message. It says you're able to do this trade. It gives you the specific order summary summary. We're going to sell 100 SPY stock at the market price, duration day. We place the order, and boom, it shows up in our account. Now notice what happened. I'm going to bring your attention to the upper right corner where our cash value has increased. Notice our cash value has gone up. We had $20,000 before, and now our cash value is $27,228. The reason for that is because we received some cash when we sold the stock short. If you look at the portfolio value, you're going to notice that's a negative value, and the reason for that, of course, is because we're missing some shares. We're short those positions. Our actual account value, though, has not changed. It's still right around $20,000. And that's the way that when you do a short trade, it's going to show up in your account. So let's summarize this. When we buy stock long, we own the stock, versus when we sell stock short, we're borrowing it. When we buy stock long, we can hold the stock forever, versus when we sell stock short, we must return the shares. When we buy stock long, we receive dividends if they're paid. If we sell stock short, we owe the dividends if they have to be paid. We want the stock to go up if we're long, versus we want the stock to go down if we're short. And of course, it's a bullish trade versus a bearish trade. And that's your basic understanding of buying stock long and selling stock short.